Here, this is for you.
Thank you. God bless you, Mike.
The cold wind moved slowly through the empty streets of New York City. Neon lights from closed shops reflected on the wet sidewalk. Most people had already gone home, safe and warm inside their houses. But on a quiet corner, near an old grocery store, a man named David sat on the ground. He wrapped himself in a thin, dirty blanket that could barely protect him from the freezing night. His clothes were torn, his shoes had holes in them. His hands were red and shaking from the cold. Every night, this was his home. A piece of cardboard under his body. A broken backpack as his pillow. And the street as his bedroom. People walked past him all day. Some looked at him for 1 second and then turned away. Some pretended not to see him at all. Others crossed the street to avoid him. To them, David was invisible. But inside his heart, a storm was raging. He looked up at the dark sky and whispered softly, "How did I end up here?" Just 5 years ago, he had a job, a family, and dreams. Now, he had nothing. No money, no home, no one to call, only memories and pain. Sometimes, late at night, David talked to himself. He remembered his daughter's laughter, his wife's warm smile, their small apartment filled with love and hope. Those memories hurt more than the cold. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old, cracked mobile phone. The screen was dead, no battery, no signal, but he kept it like a treasure. It was the last connection to his past. He held it close to his chest and closed his eyes. "Maybe tomorrow will be better," he whispered. But deep inside, he was losing faith. Cars passed by, lights changed. The city never stopped, but David remained there, alone, cold, and forgotten, waiting for a miracle he no longer believed in. As David sat on the cold sidewalk, holding his broken phone, his mind slowly traveled back in time. Back to the days when life was simple. Back to when he still had a reason to smile. He remembered waking up early every morning in his small apartment. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. His wife, Emma, would stand in the kitchen, humming softly while preparing breakfast. Their daughter, Lily, would run toward him and jump into his arms. "Daddy, don't be late today," she used to say with a bright smile. Those words were once his biggest motivation. David worked in a factory on the edge of the city. The job was hard, the hours were long, but he never complained. Every drop of sweat was for his family. Then, one terrible day, everything changed. The factory announced its shutdown. Hundreds of workers lost their jobs overnight. David walked home that day with heavy steps and a broken heart. "I'll find another job," he told his wife. But days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. No company wanted to hire him. Then another disaster struck. Emma fell seriously ill. Hospital visits became routine. Medicine bills piled up like mountains. David sold his belongings, then his furniture, then even his wedding ring. Still, it was not enough. Stress and fear entered their home. Arguments replaced laughter. One night, Emma looked at him with tired eyes and said, "I don't want you to suffer because of me." Soon after, she left with Lily to stay with her parents. David promised to fix everything. But he never got the chance. Without money, without support, and without hope, he lost his apartment, he lost his family, and finally, he lost himself. Now, sitting alone on the street, David whispered, "I failed them." Tears mixed with rain on his face. The past was not just a memory. It was a wound that never healed. The rain was falling harder now, hitting the streets like tiny needles. Cold water ran down David's face, mixing with his silent tears. Most people hurried past him, holding umbrellas, looking at their phones, trying to escape the storm. No one stopped. No one cared. David pulled his thin blanket closer and lowered his head. He was used to being ignored. Suddenly, a pair of shoes stopped in front of him. He slowly looked up. A young woman stood there, holding a small umbrella. Her coat was wet from the rain, and her hair stuck to her face. Yet, her eyes were warm. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. David was surprised. No one had asked him that in years. "I'm fine," he lied quietly. The woman did not leave. Instead, she knelt beside him and opened a small bag. She took out a sandwich and a bottle of water. "Please, eat something," she said with a gentle smile. David hesitated. His pride wanted to refuse. But his hunger was stronger. "Thank you," he whispered. As he ate, she sat beside him in the rain, listening. She asked his name. He told her, David. She introduced herself as Sarah. For the first time in a long time, David felt human again. Not invisible, not forgotten, just a person. Sarah noticed something in his hand. It was the old broken phone. "You still keep this?" she asked kindly. David looked at it and smiled sadly. "It's all I have left from my old life," he replied. She listened as he shared his story. About his job, about his family, about his mistakes. He expected her to judge him. But she didn't. She simply nodded. When he finished, Sarah stood up and said, "Come with me." David looked confused. "Where?" "To a cafe nearby," she replied. "You need warmth. And maybe, we can charge your phone." David's heart skipped. Charge his phone. He had not heard that word in years. With shaking legs and weak hope, he slowly stood up and followed her. Not knowing, this small act of kindness was about to change his life forever. Inside the small, warm cafe, the smell of coffee and pastries filled the air. David sat at a corner table, shivering slightly but grateful for the warmth. Sarah handed him a charging cable and watched patiently as he plugged in his old, cracked phone. The screen flickered to life. A soft glow illuminated David's tired, weathered face. He hadn't seen this light in years. "Wow," he whispered, almost to himself. "This still works." Sarah smiled gently. Sometimes, the smallest things bring hope. Just as the phone finished charging, it began to ring. David froze. The ringtone was one he had not heard in a long time. His hands shook uncontrollably. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, yet something inside him stirred. He answered, his voice barely audible. "Hello." A strong, familiar voice spoke on the other end. "David, it's Mark, your old boss. I've been looking for you for years." David's heart stopped. He blinked, thinking it was a dream. Mark continued, "I'm starting a new company, and I need you. You're exactly the person I've been searching for." David could not speak. Tears blurred his vision. He dropped the phone onto the table for a moment, overwhelmed. How is this possible?" he finally whispered. His voice cracked. Mark's voice was calm and encouraging. "You're talented, hardworking, and honest. I never wanted to lose you. Please come back." David's hands were shaking, his chest tight with disbelief and joy. He looked up at Sarah, who nodded at him with a soft smile. "See, sometimes one call changes everything," she said. He sank back into the chair, trying to process the moment. For the first time in years, hope returned to his heart. The streets, the cold, the hunger, and the loneliness, all of it felt distant now. All because of one simple phone call. David whispered to himself, his voice full of emotion. This is real. My life can change again. I'm not lost." For the first time in a long time, he felt alive. And he knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. Months had passed since that life-changing phone call. David stood in front of his small apartment building, holding the keys in his hands. The sun was shining brightly, and the city no longer felt cold or unwelcoming. Gone were the nights of sleeping on the streets. Gone were the empty stomachs and endless loneliness. He had a job now, a purpose, and a roof over his head. Every morning, he walked into the office with confidence. He worked hard, but this time, hope fueled his every action. He smiled at colleagues. He laughed. He dreamed again. But David didn't forget the streets. He remembered the pain, the hunger, the despair. And he knew he had to help others who were still struggling. On weekends, he volunteered at shelters. He brought food, blankets, and kindness to those who had none. He shared his story, inspiring others to never give up. One day, as he was delivering food to a shelter, he saw a familiar face, Sarah. She had stopped by to check on the people she had helped before. David ran to her, his eyes shining with gratitude. "You saved my life," he said, voice trembling. "No, you saved yourself," she replied softly. "But your kindness, it started everything." He realized that small acts of compassion could create miracles. One phone call had changed his life, yes, but it was also Sarah's kindness that gave him hope when he had none. David sat back in his apartment that night, looking at the city lights. He thought of the streets he once walked, of the cold nights and the pain. And then he smiled. Never lose hope, he whispered to himself. One moment can change everything. One person can change your life. From homelessness to hope, from despair to inspiration. David's journey was proof that no matter how dark life gets, the light can return. And with that thought, he went to sleep, peaceful, grateful, and ready to face a new day. The story ends with this message for everyone. No matter how lost you feel, never give up. Life has a way of surprising you.